Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel, How Generative AI Took Personalization from Buzzword to Buzzworthy. I'm Yory Wurmser, and I'm a principal analyst at eMarketer. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to dig into generative AI along with my special guests. Joining me are Jennifer Ferrasi, Chief Data Officer at Digitas. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Uh, Todd Hassenfeld, Global Digital Commerce Senior Director, Strategy and Execution at Colgate-Palmolive. Hey, Todd.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great to have you. And last but not least, Tess Cornfield, Vice President, Product and Data Science at ThreadUp. Hey, Tess.
Hey.
So one more thing before we begin, just let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see where our audience is. So all of you are top marketers, so it's no surprise did you use generative AI, but you're not alone. According to Winterberry Group, 6 of 10 advertisers use generative AI in some part of their creative process. And a Capgemini report recently said that 3/4 of CMOs they surveyed in October already had budgets for generative AI marketing initiatives or plan to allocate them within 6 months. And 6 months is now, since this was in October. But the three of you are pros. You guys are at the forefront of what's happening. So I really just want to kick this off by asking you, where has generative AI had the biggest impact in your marketing today? And Tess, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm super glad to be here. So I work for ThreadUp. I'll just give you a brief summary of how our business works and where AI has played a big role. So we sell secondhand clothes. We're one of the largest marketplaces for secondhand, and we are listing tens of thousands of products a day. We have over 4 million listings. So it's really important for us to get scale from all of those listings, and generative AI, machine learning have played a huge role in us being able to do that. So we have, our operational world is very AI heavy and technology heavy and always has been. So for us to create great listings, that's how we market. Our products are our content. And so it's really important for all of the generative AI technology to create amazing listings that we can then get in front of customers. So it plays a huge role in operations. Where we are creating great product descriptions, product titles, QA, photography attributes, all of those things. We use it in our search on our site to give people great results and personalize for them. And then all of that content from all of those items is used in all of our marketing campaigns, product listing ads, et cetera, to get the products out to customers. And so again, products are our content. It's a huge part of what we do. In operations in particular, AI has a huge role to play. And so I think one of the really cool things about generative AI is it's kind of changing the playing field for businesses. So for a company like ours that just has so many SKUs that we need to create, it can really help us do something different than other companies.
Yeah, and it's almost not even personalization, but for the products, it's really creating very, very tight, specific type of descriptions for them.
Yeah.
Great. Todd or Jen, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll say overall, I would just when you think about Gen AI, and a lot of times you talk with brands, you think about silos and all different departments. I think what Gen AI has done as fast as it came out and is the potential, both for good and as well as risk, it's really unified a lot of teams to collectively, how do we figure this out? How do we find use cases? How do we make sure that we're using it responsibly? And I know we'll talk about more specific examples as we go, but I think, we probably shouldn't ignore that fact of something that really brought multiple teams together, from the top of leadership to entry level people, all trying to solve how do we maximize this, while still recognizing the risk and being responsible.
Yeah, I would say we're seeing similar things from an impact perspective, particularly around efficiency in our process and in the operational side of things, at least for now.
It makes sense. And as you said, Todd, it's bringing all types of teams together, not just marketing, but in the benefit of marketing. So how is all of these early moves into generative AI already made the customer experience better? Are you seeing your consumers, your customers reacting to this content? Are they rebelling in any way? Jan, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a different perspective, right? Because for us, our customers are the Todds and the Tessas of the world. But our customers, we see reacting as well. I think there are three ways so far we're seeing it positively impact that end customer experience. One is it's making it easier for them to find things. So it's providing mechanisms to truncate that path to consumers actually getting what they're looking for. The second is it's starting to make things more relevant to them. Tess, you were talking about some of the work you use in your, or the Gen AI you use in your product listings, right? It's enabling people to get content and experiences that resonate with them. And it might be different than the person sitting next to them. And then the last is really on the inspiration front. I think we're seeing a lot of positive reaction to Gen AI providing inspiration to people, whether that's finding new recipes. Todd, I think you mentioned that in our last chat, or the Spotify AI playlist is another great example of it providing an inspirational experience.
Yeah, I would say, when you think about like, consumer examples right now, for us, ratings and reviews are very important in a CPG company. And what Amazon has done, recently with summarizing a Gen AI summary of those reviews, it really makes it easy for the consumer now to look at an overall paragraph, but then to dive deeper into different parts of it, right? Depending on the product, you can look specifically at different things, both good and bad, right? From the positive reviews and the negative reviews. So CPG brands really need to look at that and seeing, okay, how do I adjust now my content maybe to address that, the bullet points of what's working and what's not. Yeah, I agree. I think from consumers receiving better, relevant, retargeted ads, right? That we can get more efficient with how that we're responsibly retargeting those consumers. Yeah, I love the recipe idea. I think a great personalized one is like take a picture of what you have in your fridge or type in, say, the dietary needs that you have, and it provides a personalized recipe that you can make in less than 30 minutes. I mean, that's an awesome use case. And then, depending where you're at with travel, there's a lot of ways of finding, savings on travel, ideas, plan out a whole trip that's personalized for your family, for your individual style, group of friends, whatever it may be.
Any negative feedback from anyone you've been dealing with this?
We haven't seen much sorry, Todd, unless it's so bad, right? Like the negative reactions are when you miss the mark from a relevancy perspective for the most part.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when it's not relevant, incredibly wrong, or when, thankfully we haven't had this, but you hear about the stories of when content is, said to be human, but it was really all Gen AI created, and writers, content producers are not being, transparent with the use of Gen AI. I think that's where it can go sideways. But it'll be interesting, a year or two from now, will consumers want a label on content that says 100% human, AI assisted, or will a label not be necessary because we're all just used to it and we know what to expect?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to something Jen said too, in terms of how the customer is responding to all of this. Our job is to make our content easier to find, and relevant for them. And I can give you a little bit of an example from ThreadUp, and we've been using AI more in our search results. And so, we've basically changed it so that before, if someone searched dress, they would get dresses. And now they can be much more descriptive in their language when they're trying to find products. And, we're seeing this in other tools too, but they can say Sunday brunch dress, or they can say satin dress with ruffles, right? And still get really amazing content that's personalized to them. And we saw customer reactions to this. It did change the way they engaged with the results that they got. They were kind of more click through of those products, more engagement with the results. And so I think there's a lot of signals that customers are interested in kind of getting higher quality results from their searches. But what's kind of interesting is that there's still, a core use case that people have. They want to be able to search for dresses and get really great results. They want to be able to search for brands and get really great results. And so there's a question about how quickly can we adjust consumer behavior to adapt to all of the new capabilities that AI is giving. It's not going to happen overnight. So even though customers are very receptive to this technology at this point, I don't know how quickly they're really going to adapt and like make use of it as it continues to evolve.
Yeah,
I think
oh, go ahead, Jen.
I think it's also worth calling out, it's somewhat industry dependent. I know there is a lot of pushback right now in the beauty industry, for example, around Gen AI and what it can do. Using it to display what beauty is, right? There's a lot of discussion and some controversy around the role it plays in those industries.
For sure. And just from in my perspective, Tats, you mentioned search. I'm just curious how it's going to affect general search and search marketing. I think that people's questions are going to become more specific and the expectations are going to change. It's a little too early to see how, but it's something to keep an eye on. So internally, how has generative AI saved you time and saved your company time? How much of a human touch is still needed? Jen, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. So I would still say there's a fair amount of human touch needed. But where we've really seen Gen AI helping is both like getting us to a starting point. So oftentimes we can use it to aggregate, similar to your example with reviews, right? We can use it to aggregate things and give us a starting point, whether it's we're looking for specific information, we're trying to write answers to specific questions, those sorts of things. The other place we've really seen it start to help is scale. So once we've created all of the pieces, Gen AI can help us put them together in millions of different combinations in a much faster way than we could do it if we had to do that manually.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think a human always has to be in the loop, especially at the beginning, and even as you progress and monitor, and, depending on your progress. But I think when you think about internally communications and how can it identify bias or blind spots, as long as you're doing topics that you know already, you could take your team priorities and you can say, okay, my goals are this, right? So I want to grow share, I want to grow sales and household penetration, right? Probably what most of us are trying to do. But you could then take your priorities and say, are we getting to these goals? Like, are these the right priorities? And if they are, how should how should I resource allocate them? Kind of, that kind of, take away the bias that every team says theirs is the most important, but then also ask the question, if I'm trying to achieve these goals, which priorities aren't there? And that's kind of your blind spot piece. And then you can evaluate them. And maybe when you see the blind spots, you might say, no, we are doing that, or we do want to do that, but you wrote it wrong, or it's not intuitive to maybe the audience. And then once you align on those bias and blind spots, now you can take it and say, okay, how do I craft a message to my senior leadership team in the C-suite? How do I craft it to my team in Germany? How do I craft it to a new team just starting out? You can have all these different variations. You can also use, video tools. Synthesia is one that's out there. Anyone where you could, create one message, but then do different languages at scale to have that same message go across. I think one other one just quick is like, summarizing earnings calls, across quarters, across years and, across categories and countries, and really see what are companies saying and how does that impact how you look at it from what you're doing as well as your competitors.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, as a writer, just unblocking, if you're stuck on something, if you have some sort of creative block, it's a great way to get unblocked. Not necessarily using it to take their ideas, but just to see what some suggestions are, and that can often unlock stuff. I think creatively, it's really useful in that way. Turning a little bit towards measurement, how have you been able to measure how effective your use of generative AI has been? Todd, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about product detail pages and the importance of product detail pages, because of all the money we all spend on social, on search, connected TV, a lot of them lead to PDPs. And do we have the best optimized one? So, when you look at what, Gen AI can do or can assist with, both from a copy and image perspective, especially from images, and we, use then a company, called Visit, which is an AI company, not Gen AI, but now we can take images that are either created, we'll call it traditionally, maybe with Gen AI, but now we can predict, using the Visit AI tool, how they will connect or convert consumers in a lot of different kind of personalized ways. So if it's by retailer, if it's by demographic, or by geography, we can get as narrow as we would like. So I think that part is really interesting, because especially when you talk of images and PDPs, a lot of time it's hard to produce images in general, just get them going. But A/B testing might mean you have two images, A and B, that are really an F, but now you're going to pick one of them because one of them scored better. When you can have more evaluation at scale, now you can really get better images, and then ideally better copy faster with different tools. And I think, yeah, I mean, when you do different tests, let's say around product titles, you can see the impact on glance views, on conversion, and then ultimately sales because of those, because you're infusing now personalized either keywords by retailer, or depending on the the demographic or target audience you're trying to go after.
Yeah, I think QA is a big part of that too. Again, like when Gen AI is creating all of this content, we have to be very mindful of, is it accurate? How accurate? How do we measure that? How do we adapt to it if it's not accurate enough? And so that's just something that we've been thinking about a lot as we're creating all of this content. How do we make sure that our pipelines are in place, that we're always measuring accuracy and we're always keeping on top of things that might be going off the rails, right? It goes back to the conversation about human in the loop. We are not at the point yet where we can set it and forget it.
Yeah, similarly, we've been measuring it mostly based on time saved, at least for now. But the accuracy piece is one for sure. And we've been working on deploying AI to actually help enforce accuracy as well. So kind of test your point around QA. And that's been an interesting journey for us.
Oh, that's so interesting. Enforce accuracy. I like that.
They do hallucinate. So
yep.
Good to do that. And, I mean, just in general, in terms of market analysis, it democratizes it, or it will democratize it. You don't need to know SPSS anymore to really get some pretty cool insights, or at least hopefully soon you won't need it. What are some of the biggest pitfalls you see from the use of generative AI? And we've just started to touch on it. Tess, why don't you start with this?
Totally. Yeah, we've touched on it a bit. There's a quote that really resonated with me that I saw last week, but think of ChatGPT as a blurry JPEG of all the text on the web. And I just think that's such a good distillation of what we're talking about with Gen AI. It's never going to be perfect. It's going to be, this aggregated view of everything that everyone has ever known. And however we use it, it's going to have its limitations. And so the pitfalls, I think, are related to our choice of how we apply it. If we're applying it to use cases where it really excels, whether that's creating imagery, creating copy, things where, that fuzzy view is good, is okay, great, right? And then like if we're making choices to use it in places where it shouldn't be applied, like, articles written by AI people with their headshots there, with no disclosures, like I think that's where we get into trouble. And so again, I think we just have to respect that it's math and respect that it's going to be wrong, and live within that boundary. And so when we're talking about, what are the skills that teams have to build in order to use Gen AI well, it's about that discernment of like, when is the right time and place to use this tool, and how do we do it effectively for the customer? So again, it's like that discernment is just very, very important. And then, of course, like all of the legal stuff is fascinating to me. I think depending on where our customers are, whether we're talking about US markets or European markets, the rules are very different and they're very evolving quickly. So, the things that we choose to use it for today may be very different than what we'll need to choose to use it for in, a few months to years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, from a pitfall, you always have to stay close with legal, your IT team, and all these. But three things that worry me, is potentially how people use bias prompts, right? But then only show the output. So you could prompt it to say, "Tell me the 5 reasons this quote unquote business idea is terrible, and frame it a different way, right? So I think prompt transparency, especially internally, will be important. I think another thing, just when you think about the content and making sure everything's right, a couple of things there. The second and third would be, a lot of people talk about hallucination, and hopefully the hallucinations are more obvious to find if you're staying in your lane. But I think it's the misinterpretation, right, of taking a data set and accurately looking at it. It's the right data set, but misinterpreting the context or whatever, and then teams or organizations using that information incorrectly, or if there's not enough information, I think that's another one. It's an incorrect, inaccurate kind of result. And the last one is just, let's make sure Gen AI isn't blamed for existing broken processes or ways of working, right? Whether it is from the review process, whether from different, kind of checks and balances or QA, let's make sure that we're diagnosing correctly. So just because Gen AI is involved, it may just be putting a spotlight on what's currently something that needs to be optimized within your organization.
I think the only build I would add there is it's also, we also have to remember what we put into it, right? So the Gen AI only knows what we tell it. So whether it's ChatGPT, which is all of the text that exists on the internet, but it doesn't necessarily understand context. It doesn't necessarily understand, in some cases, things like recency. So sometimes the output might be technically correct, but it's actually contextually incorrect. And so those are some of the things we need to make sure that we're looking out for.
All goes back to that, what we spoke a few minutes ago, that human touch. You just need to have that oversight still. How do you think marketers are going to have to pivot in the next little while to take full advantage of generative AI? What type of implications does it have for systems and staffing and skills?
I mean, quickly, I'll say, I always say plan for pivots, not perfection, right? And this is another example, but from a Gen AI perspective, overall, I'll say teams need to learn from it and leverage Gen AI, not, like be afraid of losing their business or job from it. You have to just don't worry about it taking it, learn how to learn and leverage it. And I think from a hiring practice perspective, you have to look at people maybe more that are, really curious, that are learners, that really do have that growth mindset. Past experience is still important, but it's really going to be how you're going to be able to adapt to new systems, because it's still unpredictable of where this is going right now.
I would agree with that from the midterm sort of perspective, right? You need people who are curious and passionate and want to learn and play, and they're not scared by it. I think longer term, we are going to start to see some, I call it like the bifurcation of the data skills, where we're going to need a lot more technical skills. We're going to need people who have the sort of hard programming and understanding experience with the technical side of things. And then the other side of that is we're going to need more storytellers, because we need people who understand how do we actually take and apply what's coming from the Gen AI.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the technical skills too, Jen, because what comes to mind for me about this is data engineering and data quality. In a lot of use cases, especially at scale, you're really not going to get very far if your data is shoddy and if you haven't invested in it at all. And so those functions of people who can really create awesome data layers for you to build on are going to be, continue to be very important. So, garbage in, garbage out, you have to invest in your data.
For sure. Yeah, I've noticed the storytelling aspect as well. Just how important it really empowers storytelling rather than replaces it. So those skills, those underlying storytelling skills, those underlying technical skills, it just amplifies them for sure.
Yeah,
so,
I had one other comment too, Yory,
yeah.
if you don't mind, like how we help employees learn to use these tools is also important. So I think there's a role for organizations to play in encouraging employees to try new things. It doesn't always come naturally to people to spend their time exploring some of these other use cases, and we don't want to I don't know, there's a balance between saying like, we have to change the way we're working to capitalize on this moment and, kind of push the organization that way. And then also we want people to kind of invest in it for themselves as individuals. Like this is good for everyone's career to invest in their understanding of Gen AI and other technology.
For sure. Flexibility is so important in the next few years for everyone. I'm going to wrap up with a look ahead, looking at the rest of 2024, maybe into 2025. What do you think is going to be the next big thing in generative AI and marketing?
You touched on search, and I think this is a fascinating one. Really, how will users, consumers evolve? Maybe for how we currently do it, searching for links versus everyone gravitates towards convenience in a lot of different things. And so, if the curated paragraph now or two solves their answer or gives them a step by step, that could change fundamentally how search functions. It'll all come down to trust, right? The users have to trust that the results are right. But now as marketers, we're going to have to go from keywords to really potentially sentences or different ways of thinking how they're asking a prompt or conversation based, let's say. So all the work on SEO, now it's is it going to be SGE, and how much an impact will the SEO have? But I think you go back to that PDP content of what a Gen AI tool may search for, and potentially we have based on the announcement the last day or two here, maybe a ChatGPT search coming out this month. But when you think about that PDP content, even hitting keywords, and I'll credit Spencer Millerberg at Detail Page for catching that Amazon expanded their hidden keyword character count by 10x. It went from 250 to 2,500. And I think a lot of that's probably around, from a Gen AI perspective. So, how fast will brands and marketers adjust to, how people are searching and what results that they rely on? Is it going to be links or is it going to be curated answers?
I'm really curious to see how search evolves. I also think on the product side and the customer experience side, simplicity matters a lot, and UX matters a lot. So as these tools get more advanced, the companies that win are going to be the ones that provide a frictionless experience for consumers that really, speaks to what they're trying to do and helps them do their jobs better and abstracts away all that complexity and math under the hood. So that's something that, I just think ThreadUp is investing in, and I know a lot of companies are going to be thinking about, how do I make this really easy, even though it's quite complex on the back end?
Yeah, I agree. I think the way consumers interface with AI is going to change, and whether that's through search or product or content, I think that's an evolving space for sure.
Yeah. And Todd, I'm glad you mentioned OpenAI's search. I'm curious how these platforms, these chat platforms influence marketing, if brands will need to have some sort of presence on them as they develop search functions and become, gateways to this. So Jen, Todd, Tess, thanks to all three of you for your really incredible insights. And thanks for answering, all these questions. We really appreciate it. So over to you, Susie and Jeremy.